Before we end off this lesson, I want to give you a taste of some advanced debugging techniques. These are all available in the Developer Tools panel in Chrome. Other browsers will have very similar systems. So far, we've just been logging things to the console, and this will be really useful to you to verify that events are actually occurring when they should, that functions are being called when they should, and that variables have the values you think they should have. But now let's look at some advanced debugging. For demonstration purposes, I've set up a small program that has a bug in it. You can find this program as debugging.js along with a debugging.html file in this lesson's materials. Take a second to download it and get it up in your editor. I'll quickly go through the program to explain what I think it should do. First, we have this generate username function. It gets two parameters, first name and last name, and should generate a username based on the first initial plus the last name, all in lowercase. It gets the first initial by using char at 0 of the first name, and then converts that to lowercase. It then converts the last name to lowercase and creates a username by concatenating the two. And finally, it returns that username. Then we have a click event listener on the document. In the handler function, we call generate username, passing in the name John, and then call up an alert box with the generated username. So what I expect to happen is that I click on the web page, a username is generated, and that's displayed in an alert. Let's test it and see what happens. So here we are, and I click again, keep clicking, nothing's happening. Well, let's open up the console. Aha! We have some kind of an error, something about too lowercase and undefined. Well, that might tell you all you need to know, or it might not. Well, remember that over here on the right, it points us to the exact line in the exact file where the problem is. What I didn't show you before is that you can actually click on that bit of text. This will open up that file in the Sources tab of the Developer Tools. And here it even highlights the exact line and again shows you that error. In a lot of cases, this should be enough for you to see the issue. But let's say this doesn't turn on any light bulbs just yet. At least we know that the error is something within this function here. What we can do is click over here in the margin, right at the first line of the function. Now see that a blue arrow appears there. This is called a breakpoint. A breakpoint will actually stop the execution of JavaScript right at that point. Let's try it. Refresh the page in the browser, and then click again. Now you see that the line with the breakpoint is totally highlighted in blue. This means that JavaScript has stopped right there. This line has not been executed yet. We also get a little notice of the fact that we're paused up here on the page. Now in the Sources tab, we have a panel over here on the right with a bunch of information. The key area is this Scope Variable section. Here we can see all the local variables in the function where JavaScript has stopped. Remember that local variables are variables that are only defined within that function. So we can see first name, initial, last name, and username, and most of these are undefined right now. Notice that we also have some controls up at the top here. This arrow here will unpause the script and let the program continue to run as usual. This one lets us step over the next line, executing it. There are some others you can learn more about on your own, but this step over button is the one you use most. If we click that, it executes that highlighted line, and the highlight moves on to the next line. Now over here we can see that the local variable initial has changed from undefined into a capital J. That's good, it shows that that line executed correctly. Click that button again, and we move to the next line. And we see that initial has changed to a lowercase j. So far, so good. We click again. Crash. Alright, so yeah, definitely something wrong with this line here. Let's remove this breakpoint and put a new one right on that troublemaker. We'll refresh the page again, and we'll click. And we stop right here. We're just about to execute that line, but I know that if we do, we're going to crash again. So let's see what the state of the code is at this point. We know that we're about to call the toLowerCase method of the string that's in the last name variable. And we're going to assign the result of that back to last name. So what is the value of last name at this point? Oh, it's undefined. Well, that makes sense. Undefined won't have a toLowerCase method, only a string will. But how did last name become undefined? Well, here's another neat feature. If you mouse over the parameters of the function here, you'll see the values that actually got passed in. So here we can see that first name is John. That's good. And last name, undefined. So let's look where this generateUsername function is called. Aha, we didn't pass it in a last name. I think we can fix this now. We'll go back to the code and we'll add a last name. And we'll save this. Go back to the browser, remove this breakpoint, refresh the page, and click. And there's our alert with the username jsmith. Program debugged. Ship it. Now, many of your debugging sessions may be a lot more difficult than that, and many will be a whole lot simpler. But to be honest, what we just did is pretty representative of what goes on in the day-of-a life of a developer debugging code. Being good at debugging is a vital skill for any developer in any language. Go through these steps whenever your code isn't doing exactly what you want, and before long you'll be a pro. And that brings us to the end of Lesson 2. And now for your assignments. The first assignment, as usual, is the quiz that you'll find on this course's webpage. Take the quiz. It will enforce the principles that you're learning, and it will help you gauge your progress. Now, the rest of the assignments are all programming problems. Do your best on them, but if anything goes wrong or doesn't work exactly like you expected, use the debugging techniques we learned in this lesson to narrow down what the problem is and fix it. Assignment 2. Fill in the body of this function. The containString function should return a value of true if searchString is part of mainString, and false if it's not. For example, containString independent, depend should return true because depend is part of independent. But containString independent, indie should return false because that string is not part of independent. As a hint, check into the indexOf method of a string. Assignment 3. Create an array containing the 12 months of the year, January through December. Create a function called getMonthName that takes a single number as a parameter. That function should return the name of that month. For example, getMonth3 should return March. Remember that arrays are indexed starting with 0, but here month 1 should be January, so you'll have to account for that difference somehow. Assignment 4. Create a JavaScript object named user that has properties first name, last name, and email. Populate those with your own name and email. Then write a function that takes this user object as a parameter and logs that user's info to the console. Something like log_user_info user, which should log something like johnsmith:jsmith@company.com. And the last assignment, number 5, write a program that listens for a key-up event. In the handler for that event, check which key was released. If it was Y, log the word yes. If it was N, log the word no. And if it was any other key, log I don't understand. When you're done with all that, I'll see you on Lesson 3, where we'll break free of the console and actually start doing things with real web pages.